Tom Henriksen. This is Humans Are Hard, Code is Easy. Here's a string of thoughts that ran across my mind early in my programming career. Why can't people just leave me alone and I can do my work? I can figure this out myself. I don't need any others' help or any input to turn this thing around. Why don't people understand me? I think it must be they're just dumb. They don't recognize genius when they see it. Perhaps you've been there too, a frustrated developer who feels like they know enough. However, the success you thought you'd have is out of reach. You see others who make better strides, but why? Is it a skills gap? I want to share with you how I learned about my skills gap. Java, check. Linux, check. SQL, check. Humans? What? Humans are hard. Code is easy. So I focused on the technology. One of my first mentors was a database administrator named Doyle. He really knew his stuff, but didn't say much. That can make learning challenging. One thing Doyle would do is fix the problem for me. He would fix it quickly and then leave. What did you do? He was already gone. Working with Doyle gave me some insight. Technical people hate explaining basic stuff. Ask them a simple question and they will flip the bozo bit on you. What is a bozo bit, you say? A few years after working with Doyle, I worked with a software architect named Corey. He had many interesting observations. One thing he would do if you asked him one stupid question, maybe one that you probably could have answered yourself had you done a little research on your own, he wouldn't answer your question or work with you. That is the bozo bit. Bozo, of course, referring to Bozo the Clown, bit in reference to computer bit or binary storage. Corey was pretty extreme, but many developers can be that way. To gain the respect from those developers, we need to know the technology. Humans are hard, code is easy. So I focused on the coding. I learned new technologies. I kept my head down and tried to avoid getting the bozo bit on me. A few years later, I transitioned into a new job, technical lead. One year during my annual evaluation, my leader said to me, "Tom, we think you have solid credentials. Coding skills got you the job, but we need you to develop other skills." My leader shared with me an area where I was failing. Delegation. He shared how I was not delegating work to my teammates. Case in point, there was an upgrade that needed to be done. I felt like it was easier to do much of the work myself. To explain that to some of my teammates would have taken twice that amount of time or more. Another trap I fell into with delegation is the belief in our value. We can convince ourselves that we are worth more when others can't do the same work as us. I remember working with Jamie the first time. I wasn't quite sure he understood what we were doing. And then I finally asked him. Here, he was always done quickly. Here he had created a script to update dependencies and deploy changes. I was doing this all manually. I was worried about delegation and the people I worked with had better ideas. Perhaps I didn't know everything I thought I did. Later in my career, I got to work with a leader named John. We knew each other through a mutual friend. I had begun to coach individuals and teams. John wanted an outside resource to help him change his team's mindset. He shared how most IT people work with others in a transactional fashion. We get the requirements and we solve the issue. John said, "Tom, my team is like bank tellers. They get asked to fix something and they do, just like a teller gets a check and deposits a check. I want my team to be more like financial planners. A financial planner builds relationships, then they can anticipate needs." So you're saying, John, you want your team to have a better relationship with their customers? John said, "Tom, if my team has better relationships, they will develop empathy and understanding. Relationships? Understanding and empathy? Huh? That won't work. That's what I thought at the time, but I was wrong. John knew his team was understanding and as empathetic as he'd hoped they'd be. He began requiring them to talk to the community directors when they traveled. These conversations helped them empathize. Instead of just fixing the problem, they fostered relationships too. These conversations helped the team understand the community directors had many things on their plate. It also worked the other way too. The community directors began to understand and trust John's team. If something went wrong, they trusted them to resolve it. John proved me wrong and overcame his deficit by being curious and empathetic. He was able to change the way his team interacted with the organization. He also became more influential in the organization. He has since been given additional responsibilities. From bank tellers to financial planners, he remade the image of his IT team. This brings me to my main idea. Coding skills got you the job, influence will get you the career. Coding skills got you the job, influence will get you the career. What do I mean? Developers are focusing on technology skills only. If you truly want to set yourself apart, you need to know how to influence and collaborate with teams. Gone are the days when we can just send in requirements with pizza and out pops code. Organizations are looking for more from their developers. My problem, was I was terrible at relationships. I had confirmation. I had proof. Although my first stop in my professional career was quite different. I remember it like it was yesterday. My first job out of college. My first day at Wallace. What is Wallace, you say? Well, we sold business forms and office supplies in Des Moines, Iowa. Kind of like Dunder Mifflin. Now, armed with a business management degree as I left college, I had 3 job options. I could sell insurance, or I could sell life insurance, or I could sell business forms. So I did what any sane person would do. I sold business forms. Who wants to call on their friends' parents for insurance anyways? Did I mention that Des Moines, Iowa is the insurance capital of the world? Back to my first day at Wallace. Can you believe I had to make a few cold calls before lunch? Let me remind you that in college, the only time I called my friends was when we were having a kegger. Getting people to buy business forms is a bit more difficult than getting college students to drink beer. I was given 3 prospects from another sales representative to call on. Hello, is Mike Huff available? Oh, okay. Tell him Tom Hendrickson called. Oh, yeah, I'm from Wallace. Whew. All right, 1 down. Hello, is Mike Hegna available? Oh, Mr. Hegna, how are you? It's Tom Hendrickson, your new Wallace representative. Whoa, okay. I'm sorry, Mr. Hegna, if our labels fell off your product. Whoops. I guess we got disconnected there. All right. Just 1 more, and we can go to lunch. What? Do we call on gentlemen's clubs? My coworkers all die laughing. Turns out this is their way of initiating new sales representatives. Similar to Tommy Boy, my sales techniques were not appreciated. Soon after the first day in sales, I started to realize something. This wasn't going anywhere. Lucky for me, a friend from high school had reached out and shared all the opportunity in technology. So I began to pursue a new degree and head in a different path. I began work as a developer. Now, working as a developer is quite a bit different than working in sales. Working in sales, the sales office was always full of people. They would be talking on the phones to customers, talking to each other. The developers I worked with, well, they were a quiet bunch on the whole. And Friday afternoon in the sales office, the newest rep had to go get beer for everyone. Friday afternoon with the developers was quiet, just like the rest of the week. Now, perhaps it's starting to sound like I didn't want to make this change, but that was not the case. I slowly began to realize I was more Spock than Jimmy Fallon. The quiet, contemplative work of developer suited me more. So as I began my career as a developer, I worked in a lot of different technologies, most of them quite old at that time. I began hearing a lot of buzz around the Java language. So I began to read and work through tutorials in my free time, nights and weekends. All this work paid off a few months later when a company leader came to me and said, "Tom, would you be able to help Dave with a new application?" Turns out they needed someone who could write an application using Java. I, of course, agreed. Like Luke beginning to use the Force, I was starting with some basics. As my development career began to improve and progress, I started to learn a lot of different things. I worked with someone who was quite sharp from a technical perspective. Eric wasn't easy to get along with. You might say he was a complete jerk sometimes. He would yell at people he worked with. The managers and the team put up with this in large part because Eric was so productive. I can still see it now when I close my eyes. Now, Eric was a smoker, and he was trying to quit, which made Eric even more testy, if you can believe that. Eric and Sri were working together on an API. Sri had made some changes to some files they were working on together. I remember walking down a row of cubes. Off to my right, I could see Eric and Sri's cube, and he was a little mad. You know how people get mad and their veins look like they're going to pop out of their head? Eric's veins were about ready to explode. He was yelling at Sri, and then he ran out the door. I guess he needed a smoke. I went into Sri's cube and said, "Sri, are you okay?" Sri looked at me and said, "Yeah, Tom, I'm fine, but no one should have to put up with him." Sri couldn't have been more correct. Eric was a tyrant who ran around like Darth Vader, intimidating everyone. We all put up with it in a large part because he was able to code a lot. Just because developers act like Spock, don't forget, we have feelings too. Now, I would like to tell you that Eric was let go and the team was able to move on. However, the company did nothing to him. Eric's behavior was left unnoticed. Now, if you work with someone like Eric or perhaps a nice version, they might take all the tough work and make it easier for the rest of the group. But that doesn't help develop the team. It can stunt the overall growth of the group. If you work with a coding hero like Eric and they take vacation, things can fall apart. Let me tell you a story about a leader who dealt with a similar issue. Now, Ben was a leader I worked with, and he had a coding hero on his team. We'll call him Dave. Now, Dave would code solutions that were more complex than others could understand. Now, Dave was coming up on a milestone birthday, and he had a long trip. He planned on taking 3 weeks off. He loved to bicycle, so he was going to bicycle across multiple states with all his gear. Now, Ben, he knew this was going to be an issue. So he met with the team, and the team talked through the challenges. The team decided to have knowledge transfer sessions with Dave and the team. Ben helped foster this collaboration, and the team was able to slowly chip away at that knowledge gap. It also helped the team become more resilient as well. The next stop in my career, I began to master my skills in Java. I was responsible for a new application that required me to learn some new technology. Now, working in software development is a bit like song sales on iTunes. One day something's hot, the next day it's out of date. During this time in my career, many open source tools became popular. Mastery for Luke Skywalker came after a battle with Darth Vader. Developers have small battles each day. As Stephen Pressfield says, the amateur tweets, the pro works. Professional programmers show up every day. Now, the first application I had to debug, what really was an interesting conundrum that I had to be involved with. Because today, as I look back, the tools for debugging are much more mature. But the first application I had to debug, I was armed with print statements in a log file. Quite primitive by today's standards. Let me see here. How can I see where that value is being set here? Okay, let's add a print statement, recompile. Oh, I forgot the semicolon. Okay, semicolon, recompile, run the report, tail the log. You got to be kidding me. The database, I have to add that column. All right, update table, run report, tail log. Now that looks better. Now, debugging today is so much easier, but we still have to use the old bean. As Steve McConnell points out in his book, Code Complete, we need to learn the types of mistakes we make. Early in my development career, I made the same mistake time and again. I would forget to initialize my variables. I can still hear my coworker Ken laughing at me as he would look at my code and point out my obvious error. Developers like to impress each other. I had to use the singleton pattern to fix that. There are many esoteric topics we can talk about for hours. In Essentialism, the Disciplined Pursuit of Less, Greg McKeown talks about the importance of editing to journalism. He talks how the journalists write the stories and bring the ideas. However, the editor has the important job. They have to review the piece and rework it. Over my years as a developer, I've mentored many young and junior programmers. One in particular sticks out. We were debugging an application he was working on, and at this time, he began to read about code basics. He would periodically add unnecessary code. So I remember looking at the code he was debugging together and looking at him saying, "Why is this loop here?" He looked at me unsure and said, "I don't know. I thought it would help." He thought it would help. Once we removed the unnecessary loop, we resolved his error. Adding code is easy. Knowing what to keep is hard. Now, it's not that I am saying computer science basics are not important. We need to master those too. However, if we put our sole focus on them, our careers will falter. We spoke earlier about Eric. He had mastered computer science basics. However, his teammates couldn't stand him though. We need to be good at our work and get along with our teammates. If we do just one of these, we aren't doing our job. As my career progressed and I started to develop more soft skills, I got some promotions as I worked along. I first, of course, started out as a developer. Then I moved into a senior developer. I got another job as a technical lead. And then finally, I was the manager of software development. So I knew these soft skills were helping me head in the right direction. And after managing a team for a few years, I thought I knew what I was doing. Then I realized there was another important lesson to be learned. I remember a few years ago, I came to work on a Friday morning in May. I remember I took my kids to school and came into the office at my normal time, a little before 8 a.m. However, I noticed that my boss was in. This was strange because he usually came in at 9 or after. Anyways, I sat down and unpacked my things. And then my boss, Scott, came to my desk and he said, "Tom, can I talk with you?" I said, "Sure." And I followed him to his office. Although when we came to his office, he took a right instead. That's strange, I thought. Then We took a left into Sandy's office. Who is Sandy, you ask? Well, she was the director of human resources. I knew something was up then. We sat down, and Scott said, Tom, today is your last day here. If you've ever heard that said to you at work or in a relationship, you know exactly what it feels like. The rest was strange as I felt a calm come over me. I knew something was going to happen. However, as I looked across the table, I could tell Scott and Sandy felt terrible. They discussed the next steps. I packed my things and left. Getting fired gives us a chance to reflect. What did I do wrong? How could this have been avoided? As I look back, I realized one lesson first. What led to this was clarity. I did not clearly understand an objective. Therefore, the team I led didn't execute accordingly. This took time, though, as processing this can be problematic and we can get frustrated. And I wanted to blame others, but I realized I needed to own my mistakes. Another important lesson I learned was, as John taught us before, the importance of relationship management. As I began to reach out to my network, the opportunities were plentiful. We need to continually foster our network connections. Getting fired can be a time where it's important to reflect on this and unpack the wisdom. Of course, we need to take the time to unpack it. These painful times can be full of learning. We just have to take the time to do it. Mastering basic skills requires guidance. Early in my career, I worked with Wei. He instilled in me a systemic approach that I still use today. Wei began to notice how I was focused on 5 different things at once. Wei's guidance was brought clear to me a few years later after I attended a seminar. At Michael Hyatt's Best Year Ever conference, he discussed goal setting. Michael said, detailed plans are great if you're building a nuclear submarine. For everything else, just focus on the next step. Wei and Michael agreed on this point. Don't overthink it. In Proverbs, it is said, in the multitude of counselors, there is safety. Luke's journey first brought him to Obi-Wan Kenobi. He learned some basics, similar to what I learned from Wei. He kept learning, and so have I. Reflection doesn't come easy for me. I want to charge on to the next thing. In David Marquis' book, Leadership is Language, he discusses the importance of red work, the doing, and blue work, the thinking. He walks us through some examples. For instance, he talks us through the Industrial Revolution, where the workers did the red work and the managers did the blue work. Today, knowledge workers must do both. To reflect better, we need to take a step back and reflect on how we are doing. How can I improve my coding, debugging, and testing? So perhaps you're thinking, I'm a developer. I don't need no stinking soft skills. If you don't want your career to improve, keep on keeping on. My career path has improved dramatically as I realized the importance of communication, relationships, and influence. Let's explore 3 core soft skills that will set the stage for a career transformation. So remember, coding skills got you the job, influence will get you the career. Number 1, communication. Listen to what is being said. Ask good questions and seek clarity. Developers who do this write better code. Know what you want to say and say it. Early in my career, I'd opened my mouth many times. I started talking. Know your message and say it. Number 2, influence. In the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, he describes how we need to talk in terms of the other person's interest. I once tried to convince a corporate vice president that we needed to use a new technology. He wasn't interested at all, oddly enough. However, the next time I spoke to a corporate leader about a technical change, I aligned it with a corporate objective. The outcome of that conversation was quite different. Number 3 of the 3 core soft skills is leading change. When we want to lead a change, we need to share the vision. A few years ago, I got to work with a sharp product owner named Nakia. We began working together on an application for customer service representatives. As the team began to work through the user stories, Nakia began to notice the team wasn't connecting to the true vision of the product. That's when she had an epiphany. She wanted us to take a field trip. So the team spent an entire day with those customer service representatives. We listened to the calls they were taking. We saw them struggle with the existing application. That brought the team back energized and ready to go. Nakia was able to share a vision and connect us all to what she thought would create a successful project. These 3 core soft skills can change your career direction. Let me share how I use them myself. Early in my career, as I began to be a manager, I tried to get to know the team. This can help build trust and influence with them. Now, perhaps you're thinking, these won't work for you. Let me share a story with you about AJ. His path was a rocky one. Now, AJ was a strong developer, but he rarely talked. He worked in a slow, methodical fashion and always kept his emotions in check. Over time, his teammates became irritated with his style. I tried to get to know AJ. We connected on a few things. For instance, AJ traveled to Germany to pick up his new BMW. He was quite excited about that. However, his unwillingness to communicate with the team and the product owner was wearing thin. That's when my manager came to me and said, "Tom, it is time for AJ to decide if he wants to be part of the team." My manager asked me to put AJ on a PIP, performance improvement plan. I had 60 days to help AJ improve, or else. When I met with AJ and explained the situation, he began yelling at me and stormed out of the meeting. The first few weeks after this incident were really shaky. AJ wouldn't talk to me or anyone on the team. I kept checking in on him daily, and he wouldn't talk to me or anyone else. I knew he was an introvert and he needed his space and time. Eventually, AJ and I sat down and talked through the PIP and the situation. He was very frustrated with this. I got AJ to agree to try some experiments. We met as a team and crafted some working agreements. These helped us determine how we would work together and how we would collaborate. The product owner gave AJ one final shot. In the end, we were able to give AJ the space he needed. He was able to develop the soft skills he needed to change his career direction. Through coaching him and his teammates, we worked through it. Leading this change in the organization, I had to use the 3 core soft skills by influencing and collaborating with the team. I learned how to help AJ, myself, and others. You can do this too. Coding is important, but it's not enough. We can keep our head down and bozo it through our career, but that won't get us where we want to go. Relationships matter. Empathy and understanding matter. Communication matters. These soft skills can lead to more success, which leads to more influence. People seeking out your opinion as the expert. People choosing you to be on their team. Managers choosing you for the most exciting projects. Practicing soft skills is how you code the future of your dreams.